All right, please take your seats. Good morning and welcome to the West Theater, day one, the first session in the West Theater. I'd like to welcome you all out to San Diego for this event. I'm Ray Cross with FCA International, and without further ado, I'd like to welcome our guests to the stage, and Captain Remmer, over to you, sir.
All right, thanks. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to actually have Mike introduce himself first, so Mike.
Hi, good morning, everybody. My name is Mike Nasetka. I am the Command and Control and Navigation Program Manager at Coast Guard Headquarters. I work under the CIO, CG6. I spent 26 years active duty, retired about a year and a half ago, and moved into this job. So I'll turn it over to Tom.
Yeah, good morning. I'm Captain Tom Remmers. I work at Coast Guard Headquarters for the Assistant Commandant for Capabilities. And right now my primary job is leading our unmanned systems strategy and the working group working to build that strategy. So one of the things we quickly realized when we were thinking about unmanned systems was that many of our missions begin with an understanding of what's happening in the maritime domain. And for me, this began very quickly after we started to develop that strategy. Because after we think about fielding unmanned systems, that really wasn't the real challenge. The real challenge was then what? What next? Vehicles and sensors alone are not enough to generate the maritime domain awareness that we need to execute Coast Guard missions. So rather, we began to focus on the data and the information as the core building blocks and not the unmanned systems or the data platforms themselves. We knew that we needed other enabling technologies, so we began to construct a series of systems to build that awareness, or what we started to call an ecosystem, to control the integrated flow of operational data to perform the mission at its core. So we ended up creating the diagram you'll see on the right there to kind of explain the purpose of this ecosystem and illustrate the need for it. It's a broader set of systems, technologies, and services that alone would not provide the full capability, but together, that whole is greater than the sum of the parts. And so while we were trying to connect the missions, the activities, the programs, and the systems, we simplified it down to the image on the left, which was that we perform intelligence, surveillance, and reconnaissance, ISR, to build maritime domain awareness, to enable Coast Guard command and control, and to enhance mission execution. So now I'll see if this works. Hey, how about that? So for us, we began by looking at the National Maritime Domain Awareness Plan, and that states that MDA is, quote, the effective understanding of anything associated with the maritime domain that could impact the security, safety, economy, or environment of the United States. So you quickly realize that's a lot. Anything associated with the maritime domain. Tremendously broad, and of course it cannot even be fulfilled by a single agency. So we must rely on many contributors to help build that national MDA picture. Project MINERVA is our initiative to build those capabilities and processes to fulfill our contribution to the nation's maritime domain awareness. Our strategic approach is really to conduct small-scale deployments, field to learn rapidly, and scale intelligently to achieve that vision for Project MINERVA. So today we're going to talk a little bit about the journey that we're on and that we've taken to get to this point, and how we plan to envision the roadmap to build an operational data ecosystem. So now I'll pass it over to Mike.
All right, so what we're looking at up here is a slide that kind of shows our existing C5I, our command and control architecture, right? There's lots of individual systems up there, but when you look at them, they're all individual systems that don't really talk to each other. Some are meant for shoreside command centers, some are cutter command centers, some are other users, you know, and so it kind of shows the disparity and really the disconnect between cutter users and small boat or shoreside users. But really the bigger problem with this slide was this was produced by now Rear Admiral Johnson, who's the D9 commander, about 12 years ago when he was COC3 Sen, and really nothing's changed on it between when he put this slide together and today. We've got a lot of problems. I'll call them problems that are existing. that we really need to address to develop the next generation operational data ecosystem. Right now we have way too many stovepipe systems. We don't share data effectively amongst all of those systems. The operators need to correlate the information across the multiple information systems, computer monitors, domains. We need to determine to do this, though, we don't even understand our true information exchange requirements. We don't know what information needs to go to get the operator so that they can make the best informed decisions in a timely way with all the mountains of information that is pushed towards them. Once we understand what the actual information exchange requirements are, then we can actually develop a PACE plan: primary, alternate, contingency, and emergency. I think a lot of us that have been communicators for most of our lives and careers think about PACE primarily towards voice comms, but it's so much more than that. It's for video, it's for data, it's getting the information to the operator to enable the 7 rights. So looking functionally at our existing architecture, you can see all of our assets don't really share tactical information. This isn't a slight at the folks that have spent a lot of hard time building these systems. Right, I spent half my career building a lot of these systems. I spent half my time afloat, my other half in the C5I world. It was just a function of when a system needed to be replaced. We replaced it with a like-time system. We're now to the point where we have lots of systems going end of life all at the same time. So now we need to evaluate how could we replace, instead of a system, how do we build an entire database, data-driven ecosystem? Some of the other things you can see in here, there really is only one ComSat-Com pipe to move information between all of the tactical units back to a shoreside command center or send tasking back to those. Every unit has its own server farm, further driving the stovepipe systems and not providing the data to yield information to support decisions at the enterprise level. It leaves the operators the swivel chair interface in trying to correlate all of the information in their head to make a decision, instead of doing what humans do best, is making a decision and tasking out to other units. We still use, once they spend the time to make that information, we still use it the same way that Tom and I did as an ensign, and whereas lots of people have done previously. We turn around, we pick up a voice radio, and we get on the radio, and we start passing coordinates and search patterns and track spacing and what have you, and inevitably you don't break sync or you drop sync and you have to start all over. There is no machine-to-machine tasking to move data around. There is no way to get all the information into a data environment to allow AI and ML to process any of that information. I mentioned quickly about DMS, MS. This is sort of where I think we could be in FY25 if we don't do something about our overarching command and control operational data ecosystems. So all of our multi-million-dollar assets are nothing more than a tactical sensor that only provides their data to the user sitting on the aircraft or the cutter. As a result, a user can fly or float around all day long, but can't push the data anywhere to process it, can't store the data, manage it, or give it to an authorized user when and where they need it. They can collect all this data, but no analyst can make any sense of it, and as a result, they can't queue up an effective decision. We're at a key decision point. We have multiple efforts going on to replace systems, but there's only a few touch points, and that's only because of informal memberships of integrated product teams and work groups that got us there, not because it was institutionally driven. We need to come up with a better way of doing business, a culture change that drives business process change, and a unity of effort to prioritize investments. This is our once-in-a-generation chance to influence and advance the Coast Guard into the smartphone generation, a modern ecosystem in the hands of users to execute missions more effectively and use data to deliver the 7 strategic rights. We need to reach a strategic vision to provide the right user, the right information, at the right classification, at the right time, via the right route, for the right reason, on the right device. So by executing Project MINERVA, this is where I think we can end up. I'm 100% sure we can't accomplish this by the start of FY25, but I wholeheartedly believe that we can make great progress towards implementing it. A couple of things to note: all data moves to a big data infrastructure, lakes, ponds, and IDEs, to all the data to be turned into information. and that information turned into decisions supported by AI and ML, some at the tactical edge, some at the core. Additionally, while not explicitly shown on this diagram for clarity, data will move via tactical networks when and where needed to link assets, to share full motion video and or other information and data that they need. It will also allow our major assets to have data ponds. These data ponds can store our own ship's information locally and eventually send it back to a core when not operating in a DDoS type environment. If you're interested in understanding of what this is going to look like, then don't miss Captain Erickson, Captain Thompson, and Commander White's Accelerating Tomorrow's Coast Guard, Harnessing the Power of Cloud Data and Networks tomorrow at what, 9:40, John? John's hiding back in the audience. I think Captain Thompson is too, someplace. So how are we going to get there? We're going to execute Project MINERVA. You know, as I mentioned previously, Project MINERVA is really about delivering the 7 rights. When you look at that, it's kind of just a quick list of 7 things that is relatively basic. But as you start to actually unpack that information, it turns relatively complex relatively quickly. You know, that user could be somebody sitting in a command center. That could be a boarding officer on a cutter 700 miles out in the middle of the Eastern Pacific. That could be a maritime inspector deep inside of a cargo hold of a container ship, all needing to share that same information and data to enable the Coast Guard to make quick and effective decisions. It also means sharing information with what would I say? I guess 2 disparately different interests, right? You know, between the DoD.mil interest, the DHS, and the FISLTIP, the federal, local, state, tribal partners that the Coast Guard has to share information with in near real time all the time. So we have to be able to share information in the classified realm with the DoD at all times, especially when cutters are underway and aircraft are flying around. At the same time, to get the information needed to the local fire department or the local sheriff's office that's responding alongside our small boat to do a search and rescue case. So we came up, as sort of Tom alluded to, as we started building this idea or concept, a group of what we've affectionately become to call the Nerd Herd got together and came up with sort of a couple transformational pillars of how we're going to actually do this. Collaboration is going to be key. No one wedge or system or project is more important than any other. We need to start thinking ecosystem over project. We need to think with the mantra, is it good for the Coast Guard? Right now, we look at making the decisions in a stovepipe and not across the ecosystem. The Project MINERVA integration team is charged with looking across all the activities to ensure we spend our limited dollars to best enable data-driven solutions. All data needs to be enterprise data. Data is paramount to information. Information is paramount to supporting decisions. Data collected, processing, and dissemination is the end state goal. Data needs to be tagged and shareable. We must have seamless movement and delivery of data to who needs it when they need it, regardless of domain or location. Stovepipes are bad. Each piece of the system needs to perform a function the ecosystem delivers capability beyond the sum of its individual parts. We need to focus on the user. From the beginning, we need to concentrate on designing the human-machine interface to allow for an intuitive, easy-to-use ecosystem in order to prevent leaving data on the floor because the user doesn't know how to access it or must use 47 job aids or 150 clicks to figure out where the information is. This is directly linked to a talent management issue. Folks don't want to come to work and use a disconnected and antiquated technology. They don't want to use systems that have less power and availability than they have on their personal cell phones. Additionally, we're being outmaneuvered by our near-peer adversaries and narco-terrorists who use these technologies to outmaneuver, outsmart, and outperform us. Business will out-hire us for top talent. We need to live the Agile Manifesto, and building the ecosystem is a marathon, but each step needs to be user-centric as we do it. Our Coast Guard operators live in an agile world. They make decisions routinely to affect mission outcome. We need to do the same as we deliver enterprise IT systems. We have to have a bias for action. Our pace needs to keep up with the pace that can deliver at the speed of need. You know, we currently have a 5 to 7 year requirement process by the time we write some requirements documents, figure out what we want, get them approved, then convert those into functional requirements and then into contract specs and and put a contract out on the street. So inevitably what we end up with is delivering yesterday's solutions tomorrow, to steal a phrase from the king of the nerd herd. We end up awarding and procuring things on requirements that were written 6 to 8 years ago, using a process that was really designed to support reducing the risk to building stuff like aircraft carriers and nuclear submarines. We need to take the warranted process risk. We need to, in the acquisition world, in the procurement world, in the cyber world, right? No way am I saying we just need to go out and completely ignore all process or anything else, but we need to streamline the process to reduce the risk, but speed things up so that we can deliver tomorrow's solutions today. So as we start through this, the Coast Guard first and foremost is a military service, and probably a lot of you have seen that outside ring. So we've adopted some of the JADC2 principles as we relate to Project MINERVA. So we've related the slices of the pizza pie that Captain Remmers talked about at the start of the presentation to the JADC2 principles of sense, make sense, and act. Collect and integrate across all the domains covers 2 slices of the pizza pie: sensors and tactical communication networks. We need to look at a new way to procure sensors for the ecosystem and concentrate first on the question of what is going to be answered by the sensor instead of buying the shiny object and then figuring it out from there. As Tom mentioned, we're really good at buying shiny objects without thinking of the data provided. We need to flip the script on that one. Solving what I call the lightning bolt problem is where we need to determine our information as needs requirements. We need to determine the best route to get the information to the right device. We also need to be able to operate when appropriate in all areas of the electromagnetic spectrum, from the ability to string full motion video to operating in a full DDL environment. To make sense of our operational environment, we need to take all the information received across the networks into a data management architecture. To be successful, we need to operate and refine our data governance structure for all operational data and establish an effective data environment. Once we move the data into the appropriate environment, either cloud-based or on the tactical edge, then we'll be able to apply analytics to it. The final section is ask. We equate this to the visualization and tasking slice of the pizza pie. This is taking all the data and converting it into information and wisdom and knowledge. Up until this point, primarily these interactions have been machine to machine. This is where the human-machine interface will be present. This will allow the operator to make the decisions. Project MINERVA, though, is more than building an MDA system. Project MINERVA, even with the best NDA system, we end up just putting dots on maps. We need to expand this out and go to that next step of tasking operational units. We need to pass this tasking to units in a way like we've never done it before. We need to build an ecosystem to quickly enable the operators at their console to task responding units. The ecosystem must enable machine-to-machine tasking so that the operator-approved decisions can then be pushed to the navigation or mission system of the responding unit, where they can quickly review, approve, and act on it. The resulting response will also be tracked by the ecosystem to recommend follow-on actions. And with that, I'll turn it over to Captain Remmers to continue about how we're going to go about doing that.
Yeah, so Mike alluded to JADC2. Anyone who's familiar with the JADC2 lines of effort, you'll see some obvious similarities here. We've stolen liberally from that. LOE1 is really establishing that data and AI enterprise. This is going to align a lot of ongoing efforts to bring those data and advanced analytics capabilities to leverage the data that we already have as a catalyst for decision advantage and ultimately for mission execution. It means combining that data that we have with the data we need and applying the analytical tools that are out there, they're state of the market, and converting, like Mike said, converting that data into knowledge and wisdom. Line of effort 2 is about making sure that we can connect that with the workforce, both preparing and integrating the capabilities to support the workforce and also preparing and integrating the workforce to interact with those. It ultimately is not going to work unless we've got that human on the loop helping to make that decision when it's needed. Line of effort 3, this is really delivering the rest of the technical enterprise. So the sensors, the platforms, a lot of the communications networks, so that we can integrate, collect, transport all that data and information and connect it with the data and AI enterprise. And lastly, like I said earlier, the national MDA goal is broad. No single agency can do it. So LOE4 is all about that crucial partnering effort. Modernizing our information sharing is crucial. Through efforts like JADC2, Project Overmatch with DoD, also the Integrated Multi-Domain Enterprise within DHS, and then with our state, local, and port partners at the unclassified domain, we know that we have to share information with those partners so that we can take advantage of their data and they in turn can take advantage of ours. So as Mike talked about the obsolescence challenges that we're facing, the different life cycles for a lot of these technologies, they have created some obsolescence challenges now, and they're going to threaten to set us back with more gaps if we don't get ahead of that. So within this ecosystem and the rapid pace of technological innovation, we realize that there's a key approach to building that ecosystem to remain flexible and adaptive. That approach is going to lean heavily, we want it to lean heavily on models-based systems engineering as probably the most responsible way for us to construct the ecosystem. MBSE is going to help us document the technologies and define those critical interfaces to ensure that as we collect and move and engineer and store data, analyze it, and then ultimately visualize it, that those interfaces are known, those capabilities are defined, and the whole is greater than the sum of the parts. It's going to help support that strategy also to conduct small-scale deployments, learn rapidly from them, and then be able to scale intelligently through sprints and kind of a segmented architecture approach. So ultimately that MBSE is going to be able to put capabilities out there that are really plug and play within the ecosystem. And by doing that, over the long term, we see Project MINERVA expanding and delivering the full Coast Guard contribution to the national maritime domain awareness picture. So we've been talking in kind of general terms, so we'll get a little more specific here with kind of a mission thread or a use case and kind of how we see that desired end state coming together. So we're going to look at what is most probably important to almost every Coast Guard mission, and that's coastal maritime domain awareness. So what you see here is kind of that current system of manned platforms, and in many of these cases, the human is the loop in the status quo. In the past few years, though, we've added some capabilities, primarily our small UAS for the national security cutters. But like we've described before, that was a quick deployment. Those are not fully integrated, and they're not really part of the larger ecosystem. We also realize that no single capability is a silver bullet, especially in the technical enterprise. So we're thinking about a layered approach. There's lots of different pros and cons to all of these different capabilities, whether it's persistence, cost, speed, or adaptability. So we've awarded a couple contracts very recently to bring in unmanned surface vessels. 2 specific contracts to sail drone that are going to start in the next couple of months, one on each coast. These platforms, the real benefit there is extreme persistence. They can remain on station for months at a time, providing persistent surveillance as a service. We are not acquiring these assets, but we are just getting data as a service through them. That can make a lot of sense when persistence is key and in a kind of a small, confined geographic area of need. We're also, of course, looking at the possibilities that long-range UAS or unmanned aerial systems can provide. We're already a partner with CBP for the long-range UAS program, flying MQ-9s on the southern border. We see an opportunity to expand on that and provide that persistence to really expand the amount of maritime domain awareness we can cover in large areas in a small amount of time. We're also even working with DHS Science and Technology to deploy a smart buoy right here off of San Diego. These can generate their own power. They have sensors on board. They can become communications nodes and also provide that fixed, very persistent surveillance. So by doing that, these unmanned platforms can augment the current manned assets that we already have, bring more sensors out into the field, farther out offshore, and have them remain on station much longer than manned platforms. They can also employ machine learning algorithms at the edge to convert raw data into information without a human anywhere near the loop at that point. But still, those are kind of disconnected. So as we talk about communications and tactical networks, we envision mobile ad hoc networks and even satellite communications to build a mesh network to rapidly move data from all of these sensors, fuse them together, and provide even full motion video and all the information about targets of interest within the coastal domain, available for anybody who needs it. This machine-to-machine data transfer is going to enable us to have more advanced analytics ashore, support even customized user-defined operating pictures, so that we can deliver those 7 rights, the right information to the right person at the right classification domain on the right device at the right time. And finally, that same network can support the tasking, the operational tasking that Mike described earlier. We can push search patterns out, we can push autonomous follow-on commands, and have real-time feedback of what our operators and our unmanned systems are doing to execute that tasking. So this is kind of that desired end state of where we seeing the ecosystem delivering maritime domain awareness in the coastal zones. And with that, we're happy to take any questions you might have for us. And thank you very much. See a lot of familiar faces, a lot of Coast Guard partners out there. So thanks for joining us this morning, and happy to take any questions you have. Yes, sir.
Yes, Chief.
They're online.
They're on the FCA's, on our panel session on the FCA website.
Yeah, I think the question is about how are we partnering with other DHS components. One example, I know CBP has aerostats. They are going to, and they already have some of those on station. They're providing data into Minotaur. That is a partnership that we don't need to double up sensors where they already have aerostats. So integrated multi-domain enterprise at IMDE, that's going to act as a data sharing pathway between components within DHS. We're looking very closely at how we can amplify that and speed the development of that and influence that, the fielding of that capability.
And if you have a question, please step up to the mic so people can hear what the question is. Thank you very much.
Let me get that out. This way I don't have to bend over. Can you hear me all right?
Yeah.
Okay. My question is, how much are you partnering with the JADC2 components, overmatch components of the other services to leverage some of their technologies that they're implementing? Because as you've already mentioned, you know, it's very clear that there will be a lot of similar technologies used. Any shooter, you know, any platform. This is sort of, you know, maritime leveraging that, which is a great idea, by the way. I compliment you for it.
So, I mean, our, you know, being the standard coastie that likes to do things as cost effective as we can, you know, our global intent is to beg, borrow, and steal everything we can, right? So, you know, we can't really go into a lot of it in this room, obviously, but, you know, I'm the Coast Guard's rep to the JADC2 CFT. You know, both Captain Remmers and I sit on the Council of Captains for Overmatch. We routinely talk to the Overmatch team, you know. So there's a lot of the solutions that the Navy is working on for Overmatch that we fully intend to either adopt it whole or adopt the concept of and match with the systems that we have on our ships. Because obviously our systems on our ships don't necessarily match one for what the Navy has on their ships. So from the concept and the capabilities, you know, they've already done a lot of the hardcore engineering to integrate it with their systems. So we'll end up doing the engineering integration to implement those capabilities with the equipment on our ships. You I think at the, our sort of thought is if we're integrated with Overmatch and implement Overmatch-esque capabilities, we share information full-time, real-time, fight tonight with the Navy, and then by extension, that gets the greater DoD picture. I don't personally see that we're going to actually go try to play an ABMS or Project Convergence or all of the other services JADC2 efforts, but if we're lockstep with Overmatch, Overmatch's JADC2, they share with DoD.
Okay, thank you very much. Is there a way that maybe a contractor or a company that's providing some of that infrastructure would engage with you to provide background on that?
Sure.
Okay.
Would be definitely interested in that.
And I would say keep in touch with the Navy. We have ongoing discussions, like Mike said, with the Navy and the JADC2 team. So they are generally coming to us, with those types of capabilities, just like they would with any other naval operational capabilities from the Coast Guard.
Hey, how's it going? It's Jonathan Villalobos, PMW 130, over at PEOC4I. And I think there's, I just want to know a POC. A POC to name to kind of talk unmanned systems.
So I'm
Edge.
unmanned systems, and
Yep.
Mike is more the C5I and the
Edge.
Edge,
stuff.
yeah, edge computing, more about technology.
And Jonathan White back there.
Okay.
Raising his hand he's our infrastructure lead. He's the one that's building our big data environment. They're doing our talk 9, 10, 20 tomorrow.
Okay.
But between really Cam Revers, myself, and John White, I think we can point you in the right areas.
Yeah, I definitely think from the TD's perspective over with like 130 and 790, when we start talking about Overmatch or the infrastructure, we could probably single up some technology, especially about data sharing. And I also do the BDP and joint for the Navy instance. So I'll get with, you said his name is John
Commander White,
Commander
right?
White. Okay, I'll give him my information, try to get an engagement. Thanks.
Thanks.
Well, thank you. If nobody has any other questions, Tom and I will be over at the Coast Guard booth here as soon as we wrap up here. If you want to have one-on-one conversations, questions, discussions, feel free to stop by. We'll be over there for an hour or two, and then we'll be over there again tomorrow about this same time. So thank y'all. Appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.